I asked you not to show up here when I get home tonight, and you insult me even more by bringing your lover here, I said calmly to his face. Listen up, you bastard. We both told you how it was going to be and asked you not to say anything. Now I'm going to make your life a living hell, he spoke loudly. Mr. Fellworth, aren't you? I said calmly to his face. You are not welcome here. I'm going to have to ask you to watch your expressions, he yelled. My young daughter is in the other room. So, with those words, he snatched the phone out of my hands and threw it to the floor, stomping on it before we could do anything. Then, he smiled eerily and started yelling at me, "You're just some ventral printer whose wife is so sick of him." He smiled menacingly at me as I looked at my broken phone on the floor. Louise decided to join him. I had no idea what he had done to her, but she was no longer my wife. Which, she went on to say, Cameron, it's true. Roger is 10 times better than you. But now that you've told the girls, it's going to be really hard on you. You better not say anything because now Roger and I are going to have to destroy you, Louise. What are you? I didn't get a chance to finish, for while I was looking at Louise, good old Roger swung the senator at me. I fell to the ground, moving with the blow as much as I could, but it still hurt. What the hell? You hit me in my house, I said loudly, rubbing the spot where he hit me. So what? Louise will support whatever I do to you. I could destroy you right now, and she'd tell the cops that you jumped me, saying I had to defend myself. Don't you get it, cuckoo? I'm a goddamn lawyer. I do what's right. You may think you're cool in the print world, but my people make the goddamn greens that make this world go round. He started to laugh. I take what I want from who I want when I want, and there's nothing anyone can do about it. I looked at Louise from the ground. Louise, is that true? You're going to back that? I said, getting to my feet. Roger took a defensive stance, ready to try and fight me, but I looked at Louise, and he relaxed a little. She tensed up a little but looked defiant. I'm sorry, Cameron, but yes, I will support Roger in anything, even if he destroys you. You're just not a man like him, she said. I looked at her again, as if a blunt rocket hit her. Seriously, what had happened to her to be so brainwashed by this scum of humanity? I shrugged, sighing. Well then, dear wife, I have nothing more to say, but you both need to leave or I'm going to return the feelings you just gave me and unleash such hell on both of you that neither of you will ever be able to look at anyone you know again without them ridiculing you both. Roger roared, encouraged by his previous blow. He had made the mistake of thinking he could take me. Like I said, Roger was a big guy, but he was all fat, not muscle. I wasn't as big as he was, but working all day at the typewriters, I had developed a strong physique. Plus, I had been in a few fights over the years and had even done some amateur boxing, so I knew how to fight when I needed to. Roger lunged at me, and I quickly dodged him, saying that he was being stupid by attacking me in my own home. I tripped him, and he fell, smashing the coffee table, but immediately got to his feet. Roger tried to distract himself so he could pounce on me again, still feeling that his mass was enough to take me down. For a moment, he was stunned, his mouth moving like a fish in water, and then he collapsed to the ground. He looked up at me, not quite realizing what had happened. I grabbed Roger's ear and began to speak softly into his clamped ear, looking at Louise, my eyes burning with hatred. Listen, you bastard. You stole my wife and came into my house thinking I was going to be something I'm not. And now you're lying on the floor in pain. You're about to be arrested. You have no idea what you've done and how I'm going to ruin your pathetic life. You think you're a big man, and I just made you a eunuch. I let him fall to the ground, letting go of his ear. What did you do? Yelled Louise as Roger fell. Then she ran around me to him. Cameron, what the hell did you do to Roger? I shrugged, looking at the woman I would have given my life for a few months ago, and today I wouldn't have peed on her, never mind Louise. Today, you and that eunuch didn't even inquire about me before you both pounced on me. You didn't ask Sarah how she was feeling or where we all were. You just went along with that and his agenda. She stared at me intently, leaning over her fallen lover. After a few moments of silence, I filled the dead air. You don't want to ask? Then let me tell you, because you ran off for the weekend with the fat bastard, our daughter and her boyfriend came to spend time with me because she's not stupid and realized something was wrong even when I tried to deny it. Soon, Rose and Toby were here too. Oh, Cameron, you didn't, she whined. No, I didn't. Carrie and Robbie did it. They're smart, savvy, and can read between the lines, I replied. Anyway, they came to their senses to be near me, unlike you, and then went home, promising to bring breakfast Saturday morning while we figure out what to do with you and lover boy. I glanced at the groaning Roger on the floor. Anyways, I said, stretching the word, knowing the hard part was about to begin. My voice trailed off. Rose and Toby were on their way here with breakfast from their mom when they were hit by an out-of-control car. Toby died, and Rose is fighting for her life in the hospital. It was all over the news. So, if you and Noto had bothered to watch the news or even ask, you would have found out that because of you, one of our friends is dead, and another may not live. I let that sink in, but after a moment, Louise had the nerve to growl at me. It's not my fault, Cameron. We told you not to say anything. If you'd kept your mouth shut, they'd be alive. It's your fault they're dead, not mine. No, it's not, Mom. It's your fault, our daughter said, standing in the doorway. She looked at me. The police and ambulance are on their way. She looked at her mother again. I have no idea who you are, but you're not my mother. And it's your fault Uncle Toby is dead, not Daddy's. If you hadn't cheated on Daddy, this never would have happened. She lowered her gaze to her hands. And it's my fault too. Maybe if I'd said something to Daddy, he could have stopped it, Sarah. I started to say, no, Daddy, I know. But I should have said something. But the blame is on her feet, she said, pointing at her mother. She retreated to her room again, and Louise and I just stared at each other. We could already hear the emergency sirens, but no one said anything when 2 police cars appeared, and chaos suddenly reigned. Louise tried to explain that I had attacked Roger and he was moaning on the ground. When asked if it was her husband, she stammered, explaining that it was, but that I had beaten Roger anyway. I told my side of the story. An ambulance arrived, and a very sick Roger was carried out on a stretcher. The ambulance left, and I think the police were close to arresting me because I was the guy who attacked someone. My wife was swearing again that it was all my fault when Sarah came back into the room. I'm sorry, Mr. Officer, she said to the guy who was questioning us, but I have a recording that confirms everything my dad said, including that this man said he would kill my dad and that my mom would lie to protect him from my dad. She held out a USB drive to the officer. What, like Roger smashed your phone? Asked Lou, not realizing that the police officers were still in the room listening. Mom, Dad had a premonition that something might happen, so when I went to my room, I put my phone at the base of the door to record everything. She looked at the officer. I'm sorry, but after everything I've heard, I have to say that I don't feel safe around my mom. Could you please not make me stay with her? But she said she would support this man no matter what he did to Daddy. I heard him hit my dad at least once, so I'm scared. Sarah moved over to me and hugged me while looking at her mother. After that, things didn't matter. Sarah, as a minor, had evidence and testified against Louise. So my wife was arrested and taken to the gatehouse for the night. When Louise was taken out, she looked at me but didn't say anything. After all that had happened, we had no time to sleep, so as tired as I was, we showered and changed clothes. Then I had some coffee and drove back to the hospital. When we entered Rose's room, Carrie and Robbie were sitting in some chairs, leaning on each other. When Carrie saw my face, she gasped. What happened, Daddy? As she saw a bruise start to form on my face where I had been hit. We spent the next few minutes explaining her mother and Roger's visit. I then explained that I had punched him in the balls to make him realize I wasn't a cuckold. We heard a muffled grunt from Rose and found her waking, her eyes looking at me sadly. Rose, I said, stammering, I'm sorry, Petal, if I had known you were awake. I blanched, realizing that I had participated in Toby's death before her eyes. Of course, she knew when I admitted it earlier, but I still should have been a little more delicate. I saw that her right hand was moving slightly, like most of her body. It was covered in bandages. At least one of her fingers was broken, but she tried to lift her hand, and I was instantly by her side, trying to grab it without hurting her further. "Are you okay, Rose? Can I get you anything? Do you need a nurse?" I asked, and then added, "Blink once to answer yes, and twice to answer no." She blinked twice, then 3 times slowly, but twisting her unbending fingers on my arm. I didn't move for the rest of the night. The next few weeks passed very quickly. Louise's parents released her from jail on bail the next day, and then started calling me all kinds of names until Carrie brought them out into the open. When Louise went to work a few days later, she was just in time to receive the divorce papers from the bailiff and then see the same bailiff handing the papers to the owner of the company. As a result, Louise found herself on unpaid leave, suspended from work until the case was heard, and by the end of the day, living in her parents' spare room. She returned to the house while Carrie and Robbie rested, and they watched her like hawks as she packed up her things and then proceeded to her parents' car in shame. Carrie hugged her grandparents but made it clear that her mother would never be in the house again. In Carrie's opinion, after the fight with Roger and me, not only did she think her mother was shameless, but she had blood on her hands from the accident. It took most of the first week before they decided to take Rose's breathing tube out, even though she was conscious. But when they did, her first words were directed to me. "Cameron, are you okay?" I recoiled. "Rose, how can you ask that?" She smiled sadly. "I'm fine, sweetheart. I knew about Toby before you told me. I had high hopes, but in the moments after the accident, we were stunned but came to our senses. We professed our love for each other, but somehow, he knew he wouldn't make it, and I did." Now she was crying. "After I woke up the first time, I was so out of it, but I remember your eyes confirming that he was gone. I sat down on the chair next to the bed and took her right hand in my hands, still damaged but intact, unlike her missing left. She whispered to me in a conspiratorial tone, even though it was just the two of us in the room at the moment. "I had a dream last night, but in the dream, Toby came to me, and he was beautiful. He wasn't hurt, and he looked fine," she smiled. "He told me he was fine, it was his time, the accident was no one's fault, not even Louise." I looked at her, and her smile faltered a little. "I know exactly, just like Toby, no one to blame. Anyway, he told me he loved me, but now it's my job to take care of you, Cameron. He really did love you like a brother, and he was so upset about what happened to you." I looked at her. "Rose, you're the one who needs to be taken care of. Seriously, haven't you noticed that you don't have an arm?" She laughed, lifting her stump slightly. "I'm completely armless now, aren't I?" "I could help myself," I snorted. "I guess it's my job now to help you when you need it," I replied. She groaned, then laughed good-naturedly. "I'm serious, Cam. I miss Toby a lot, but I feel peaceful in that dream, and he made me promise to take care of you." I held up my hands, and she giggled. I smiled back. "Okay, you win. You can look after me. Rose looked smug, but only after you leave here. Until then, I have to look after you." Unlike those first 2 weeks, the next few months passed slowly. If I wasn't at work, I was in the hospital with Rose. If I wasn't at the hospital, I was packing up at home. The girls and I decided we would sell the house and move. There was a place in North Sydney near Crow's Nest that I was able to buy at a reasonable price, and also got a decent deal on our current place. The new house was smaller, but it was close to transportation and the medical center. It had 3 bedrooms plus an office, and if you looked out of the master bedroom window while standing on tiptoe, you could see Sydney Harbor in the distance. My divorce from Louise was in full swing. The girls refused to have anything to do with her, and the few conversations they had with their mother did not end well for Louise. Sarah, our malleable daughter, had become tough as nails and scowled at any mention of her mother. Carrie had practically moved in with Robbie in the last month, which I didn't object to. Even though Louise had called me a brainless cuckold and a pathetic lover dozens of times, it wasn't easy for her to live in her parents' house in a spare bedroom. They called me a couple of times to see if I could reconcile, but after I showed them the audio of that night with Roger and Louise from Sarah's phone, they apologized and stopped trying to work out our problems. If Louise's life was spiraling downward, Roger's life dropped like a stone to the bottom of a pond. He had to have one of his testicles removed, and although he named me in a lawsuit and the police told him he could sue me, it would end badly for him because he was at fault. I could easily make an argument in defense of my home and family. After a week of review, his place of employment quickly fired him for embarrassing their firm like that. They did this to get me to drop the lawsuit against them. However, my attorney smelled blood in the water and negotiated a settlement with them. Roger's wife also somehow got a copy of the tape. I swear it wasn't me, but I caught Sarah's sly glances at me a few times. I had no idea how she'd found it, but one evening I got a call from one Miranda Fellworth, and for an hour we exchanged stories. She had suspected several times before that Roger was cheating on her, but this was the first time she had hard evidence. It turned out that most of the Fellworth's money had gone into a trust from Miranda's grandparents. Thanks to that trust, Roger had graduated from law school years ago, and since he wasn't in the family trust, Miranda said he wouldn't get anything. They also had children, one of whom dreamed of becoming a lawyer, but Miranda suspected that wouldn't happen when he found out about his father's adventures. Roger was now living in a cheap hotel where he slept on a credit card that was nearing its expiration date. He had been unable to find a new job, and I sincerely hoped that would continue to be the case. Rose was getting a little better every day, and a month after the accident, she was able to leave the hospital with a nurse for a few hours so we could all officially say goodbye to Toby. It was strange. We were all sad, but Rose, more than anyone else, smiled a lot, laughed with people at the stories they told, and when she cried, she always ended up making the other person feel better. As for injuries, Rose's legs were still in a cast. She was still wrapped in several bandages, including her head, and her left forearm was tightly bandaged. Above her left eyebrow, on her forehead, across the bridge of her nose and right cheek, stretched a scar that was still red. The doctor said it could be corrected with plastic surgery in the future if it didn't heal and disappear. At the funeral, I made sure I was the one pushing Rose's wheelchair while she greeted people. Her caregiver smiled at me, never moving more than a couple of steps away, but she would defer to me to help Rose. A month after the funeral, I was sitting in Rose's hospital room, doing bills and paperwork when I felt her eyes on me. Putting aside the bill I was working on, I felt the hair on the back of my neck stand up. "What's the matter, Petal? Do you need something?" I asked, turning to face her. When I turned and looked at her, I was surprised. Rose was looking at me, tears streaming down her face. "Cam, a night," she tried to say. Instantly, I was at her side, wrapping my arms around her. I held her while she cried and looked at the monitors. Aside from a slightly elevated heartbeat, she was fine. It was emotional. The psychiatrist at the hospital said it could happen. From the moment she woke up, she was worried about others, not herself. "Shoo, Rose, it's going to be okay. I'm here. I've got you. You'll never have to walk alone, you know that," I said, comforting her. She cried even more and nodded, holding onto me with her good arm, now free of bandages. "I know, Cameron. I just miss him, you know," she looked at me pleadingly. "I miss him, Rose, believe me. I miss him. Toby was my best friend. I miss him when Louise did what she did. If it wasn't for you and Toby." She hugged me tighter. "Will it get better?" she asked in a moment of pain and weakness. "I don't know," I answered quietly. "I want to believe it will. Toby's gone, but you're still here, and we have kids. That has to mean something." She was silent for a moment, then I felt her relax. "Thank you, Cam. I don't know if I could have made it through without you. You get wiser in your old age, you know that," she giggled softly and nervously. I stroked her hair, running my hands through her thick, curly mane of red hair, and then leaned over and kissed the top of her head. You're welcome, Rose. Without Toby and Louise in my life, I found that I need a best friend. Are you interested in this job? I asked, still clasping her to me. Rose did what I least expected. She reached up and kissed me. I kissed her back, feeling my heart race with something I never thought I'd feel for Rose again, romantic love. Then I realized what I was doing and pulled away. Rose, I'm sorry. You're my best friend, more than that, my oldest friend, and I love you so much. But I don't know, hell, we're still mourning Toby, I said. She sighed, snuggling up to me, and I hugged her without hesitation as we sat in her hospital bed. I know, Cam. I know what you're saying, but I feel something. It never left high school, she said. That night, I fell into a restless sleep. I must have tossed and turned for hours until I finally slipped into what I immediately somehow realized was a dream. It was a dream of a bar I had never seen before. It was large, and it seemed to me that if I tried to walk from end to end, I would be walking for a very long time. There were tables everywhere, lots of people sitting around, drinking, playing darts or pool. The problem was that everyone was out of focus. I knew they were there. I even said hello to a few people I walked past. I even got a greeting from the fuzzy outlines of people. I realized they were smiling at me, but no matter how I looked, they were still out of focus. It was a pleasant dream. I was about to head to the bar when I noticed someone fuzzy. He was sitting alone at a table. When I approached, he turned and stood up to greet me. Toby! I exclaimed and rushed over to hug him, but a moment before I did, I slid toward him and stopped. He laughed. I'm glad to see you, Cam. It's okay, you can hug me, he said. We hugged, then I pulled him against me, looking at him. He looked as good as he did the night before the accident. He caught me looking him over and laughed again. You look great, buddy, I said. Somehow I know it's a dream, but it's so good to see you. He smiled, and then we sat down at the table. I had a Kraken and Coke in front of me, Toby had a pint of Guinness, and we sipped our drinks for a while. Ah, he sighed. Good stuff. He looked at me. So, how are you, Cam? He asked. I deflated a little, the dream becoming reality. Not great, buddy, I replied. To my best friend's dream, divorcing Louise is a pain. The girls are angry all the time. I'm trying to support Rose in her recovery, but it's hard, and I feel like I'm just drowning in it all. Toby nodded. What about you and Rose? He asked, raising an eyebrow. I leaned back in my chair and thought for a minute about what Toby was like in the dream. He smiled at me, continuing to raise an eyebrow. What about us? I asked. Come on, Cam. We've been friends for more years than I can imagine. You're my closest friend. I know things about you and Rose that would make anyone blush. I know you love each other, he said. I snorted. Of course, Toby. She's as close to me as you and Louise. Without the two of you in my life, she's my closest friend. Now I want her to get better. He sighed. I understand, Cam. But what about the kiss this afternoon that bothered you so much before you fell asleep and came here? You can't say it didn't mean anything, can you? Of course, an image would arise in my subconscious of my best friend throwing it at me to make me feel guilty for kissing his wife. I looked at my friend. I know it was more than nothing, Toby. I love her, always have. He smiled at me. I panicked, buddy. Rose was married to you, and Louise was married to me. Sure, we dated and even took our first steps with each other, but Toby, this is your wife we're talking about. How can I cheat on you with her? I asked, seriously. I'm dead. His tone was sad but definitive. You both can't cheat on me. Rose, like you, has so many years ahead of her. She needs someone to love and protect her as much as I do. Look, Cameron, You said yourself that Louise is already out of your life or will be soon, and you do love Rose." He looked at me for a moment, and I felt like the real Kobe was weighing something important, not a figment of my imagination. "Rose loves you too, Cameron. Of course, she's hurt by my death, but she desperately hopes you won't leave her. In her heart, she holds the same love for you that she holds for me. She probably loves you more than she loves me since you've known her so much longer." "I mean it." He leaned toward me as if he was about to reveal a secret. "If Rose and I hadn't met when you were apart, she was going to hunt you down and force you to marry her." "What?" I said, nearly choking on my rum. "How the hell do you know that?" "She told me," he smiled. I snapped back. "How could she tell you?" "You're just my best friend's dream that for some reason my dormant mind uses to help me figure things out. Rose never said anything to me about it, so how could you know?" Toby laughed. "Cam, look around you, at the walls, at this pub. This isn't just a dream, and I'm not just a figment of your tortured mind," he said. I replied skeptically, "How?" He held up 3 fingers. "3 ways," he said, with a note of humor in his voice. "First," he raised his index finger, "when you get to the hospital tomorrow, ask Rose what my last words to her were." I snorted. "I already know that. You were in the car, and you told each other you loved each other." Toby smiled, shaking his head. "Well, that's partly true, but after that, when we both realized I wasn't going to make it, I became calm. Somehow I knew Rose would see me the next day, and my last words were, 'Love, Cameron, all your days.'" I started to reply, but Toby raised his hand, extending 2 fingers this time. "Secondly, Louise is going to show up at the hospital tomorrow. It's not going to be pretty." "Toby, this is not the way," I said. "Third," he said, interrupting me this time, raising 3 fingers. "My mom will bring Rose and you each an awesome chicken salad sandwich from the Asian sandwich shop in North Harbor. So you know she was thinking of you both while she was driving. She'll be wearing yellow sandals." I looked at my friend. He laughed at me again. "Toby, how can you know?" "It's a dream, and you're dead." I said to my friend. He touched his nose like it was a secret. "Honestly, I'm not at liberty to say," he told me. "It's a miracle I was allowed to meet Rose and you at all, but I was asked to meet you, and I did. I am happy to be able to spend some more time with you." I didn't believe him, but I had to admit that I was happy to see him too. "So if that's what happens, what am I supposed to do? Marry her?" I asked. Toby laughed again. "That's up to you, friend, but if you marry Rose, you have my blessing." He raised his glass and dragged me from the booth to the dartboard. "Now that's something I couldn't say while I was alive, but love her fiercely, Cam, and I'll be proud to be your best friend no matter what you choose." For the next hour, Toby and I played darts, drank, and at one point seemed to be singing bar songs. We were even joined by other customers, though I still can't remember them offhand, well except for one other guy. It was like he was looking out for the establishment or was an important figure in the business. But as we drank and danced, the pub disappeared from sight. My last memory was Toby leaning over me, hugging me, and thanking me for being his friend as we said goodbye to each other. I woke up to hot tears running down my face. I was sad but also happy. I even managed to say goodbye. This time, by the time I shaved and dressed, I had almost forgotten about the dream. I stopped by the office, checked in with my managers. Everyone knew I was spending a lot of time working on Rose's hospital room as well as preparing to move in the next few weeks. My assistant prepared all my paperwork for the day, took the ones I had worked on yesterday, and then escorted me to the conference room where I worked with the managers on my floor for an hour before heading to the hospital. It was around lunchtime when I arrived, and Rose smiled as I entered the room. The doctors reported that although she still had a long way to go, she would be able to go home in a few weeks. She had been complaining for days that she was tired of her hospital bed, and although she had managed to get a bed with a window, she wanted to get out of the 4 walls. I was happy for her. The fact that she was settling in at home would help her a lot. We were talking about her sleeping in her own bed when Toby's mom, Camille, walked in. I didn't know Camille as well as Rose's mom and WEA, but we were casual friends, and she smiled as she entered the room. "Rose," she said in a warm, friendly tone, "you look so much better today, and Cameron is so dressed up and handsome. You're so good to take such good care of Rose. I know Toby would be proud of you," she said, leaning over to kiss Rose. At that moment, I noticed the yellow sandals on her feet and froze. "Cam, what's wrong?" Both Rose and her mother-in-law looked in the direction from where I was looking at Camille's feet. "Is something wrong with my shoes?" Cam asked Camille, frowning. "I bought them yesterday on special order." "No, I'm sorry, Camille," I replied. "Sorry, it was a dream last night." "Your shoes just reminded me, that's all," I said, trying to brush the thought away. Rose looked at me for another minute while Camille fussed. "Oh, before I forget, I picked up your lunches from an awesome Asian sandwich store in North Harbor. They have the most amazing chicken sandwiches," she said, excited and eager to tell me how they make them with everything they can fit in 2 hands for only $6. When Camille said the words chicken sandwiches, I, sitting down at the table, mumbled them along with her. "Cam, are you okay?" asked Rose, concerned. I looked at Rose, then at Camille, at the sandwiches in her hand that she was unwrapping for us, and finally at her yellow sandals. It was a dream, I told myself. Just a silly dream. I tried to convince myself that it was a coincidence. I tried to justify myself by telling both ladies that I was just tired. Camille didn't know me well enough to object, but Rose threw me a look that said we'd talk about it later. So we ate our sandwiches, and Camille was right, they were amazing. Imagine layer upon layer of chicken, lettuce, tomato, cheese, beets, pineapple, salt, pepper, and fantastic fruit relish placed between 2 pieces of very soft but crusty bread, and you have a lunch that will make your taste buds dance. After lunch, we sat and chatted about nothing, mostly about the weather and how we would get Rose home. I had already started to relax, stopped worrying, and was sinking into the afternoon lull when Louise walked into the room. Louise was dressed in jeans and a blouse, her hair was pulled back into a bun. She didn't look bad, to be honest, maybe a little thinner than the last time I saw her, but still not bad. She had a bouquet of flowers and a wrapped gift in her hands, but she waltzed along as if it was meant to be, as if the last few months had never happened. "Oh, Rose, it's so good to see you. You look good no matter what," she said. She looked around the room, then noticed me, and suddenly her demeanor changed. "Cameron," she growled. "What are you doing here? It's your fault Rose is here and Toby is dead. You have no right to be here. As soon as I divorce you, I'll make sure Rose is looked after, and she'll never have to see your ugly face again." I rose to my feet, storm clouds were gathering. "Get out," said a thin voice. Everyone turned toward the bed where Rose was crying, turning away from everyone toward the window. "Rose, it's okay. I'll get Cameron out of here," Louise said. "No, he's staying, and you're leaving," she said, tears slowly streaming down her face. I took a step towards Louise. "Louise, you need to leave," I said sternly. "For once, listen to me. You have to leave." Louise jumped up from her seat, throwing the gift on the floor. A distinctive crack was heard as the flowers hit the wall. I took 2 steps, standing between Louise and Rose, who lay on the bed with Camilla standing stunned in the background. Louise broke into a tirade. "What the hell, Cameron? What the hell did you say to her? She knows it was your fault that Toby died, doesn't she? Why on earth would she think I had anything to do with her accident or you? You're the one who needs to go. I'll look after Rose. Stay with her to make sure she's okay since she lost her husband." Louise glanced at Rose's stump, where her left arm used to be. "And if she loses her arm, I'll be happy to take care of her." I growled, "What the hell do you think? You can come here after 2 months of silence and think you have any right to talk to Rose, Cam?" I gestured to the bed behind me. "Rose lost her husband. I lost my best friend. The kids and I have been here every day since the accident. Where have you been? Cameron, the voice repeated. I continued, I know why you're here. You lost your job. Your parents got tired of your bloody ass in their spare bedroom, and you decided to manipulate Rose by trying to live off her until she got tired of you. Cameron insisted, but Rose's voice interrupted. I whirled around to face Rose, angry at being interrupted, but at the adoring face of my best friend, my anger melted away. I mumbled, I'm sorry. It's okay, Rose replied. She turned to Louise. Louise, you need to leave. With the way you've been treating Cameron, not to mention that little tantrum you just threw, it shows you're not my friend. And don't you dare use Toby's death as a crutch to blame Cameron. You've turned into a vile, disgusting creature. I'm ashamed I ever called you my friend, let alone trusted you for years. Louise started to object, but Rose raised her stump. Leave it, Louise. You can't stay with me. I am no longer your friend. You are not welcome here. Should I call security to escort you out? Asked Rose to my ex-wife. Rose pleaded, this isn't fair, no one is. No, Louise, Rose interrupted, anger rising in her voice. What's not fair is that my husband is dead and I'm crippled for life because you chose to shag your husband, who is one of my closest friends. The room grew quiet, the only sounds coming from the hallway. No one said anything. Then there was the frown on her face that I used to associate with Louise's denial of everyone around her and life in general. She shifted her gaze from Rose to me, back to Rose, back to me again, and finally back to Rose for the last time. Each time her gaze changed, a gamut of emotions ran across her face, but the frown remained. When she looked at Rose one last time, the venom came out. Well, screw you, Rose. I can see how it goes, you hypocritical, she growled. Well, you can shove whatever help I was going to give you up your ass. She didn't have time to finish before I grabbed Louise under the arm and dragged her from the room. I turned down the hallway to the nearest exit outside, slammed the fire doors shut again, and dragged Louise after me. Thankfully, they weren't panic doors. Louise hit, kissed, and swore the whole way, still yelling in the direction of Rose's hospital room. I knew it wouldn't take long for the guards to show up. I turned to my wayward wife. Louise, I don't know what the hell is happening to you. I don't know what switched you from a loving wife and caring friend to a hellish. It stops now, I told her forcefully. Louise, thank God, shut up, recoiling backwards. Cameron, she said. No, Louise. You're done. You've destroyed every relationship around you, from your daughters to your friends to me. No one, and I mean no one, wants you within 100 meters of us. You've turned into a narcissist who doesn't seem to care about anyone around you. The doors opened, and 2 burly security guards stepped out. Are you all right, Mr. Other? Asked Peter, the larger of the 2 guards. I waved him off. Fine, Peter. Louise was just a bit agitated and upset to see Rose in the hospital bed. She was on her way out though, wasn't she, Louise? I cast a glance at her. The guard wasn't fooled by my words, ready to escort Louise out instead. She looked at me, then at the guards, shrugging her shoulders. Sure, I'll see you later, Cameron, she said. I shook my head. I hope not. The 3 of us watched Louise leave. They then escorted me back to Rose's room, where Camila and Rose were whispering. After making sure Rose was okay, the guards left. The cleaners came in to clean up the mess in the room, and 20 minutes later, Camila came out as well, hugging me tightly. Thanks, Cameron. Now you look after her. She needs you, Camila whispered as she hugged me and left to catch her elevator home. Are you okay? I asked Rose, sitting down on her bed. It was just the 2 of us now. I took her right hand and squeezed it. She snorted, Isn't that what I should have asked you? I shrugged. It's been a weird day, but now with Louise, I felt. I don't know, calm down. But no, I think it all started with that dream last night. Rose raised her head and looked at me. The dream? I nodded, yeah. I couldn't sleep last night when I got home. I blushed. I think she realized that our kiss was partly to blame. Anyway, I couldn't sleep. I tossed and turned, and when I did, I dreamed about Toby in the pub. Rose nodded, almost understanding. It was weird. I knew it was a dream, and it was a big pub, and there were other people there, but it was like they were out of focus. Rose finished for me, her eyes searching mine. Yeah, they were out of focus, well, except for Toby and some other guy. I can't remember the other guy, but Toby was crystal clear when we were talking. He told me what had to happen today for me to realize this wasn't just a dream: Camille's shoes, the sandwiches, Louise's appearance. Toby said it would all happen. I looked at Rose again, her eyes telling me she believed me. There was another one, wasn't there? She asked timidly. I nodded. How did she know? I looked at her, a tear leaked out of her eyes, and she squeezed my hand. I didn't want to ask the question, simultaneously afraid and hoping it meant love. Cameron, all your days, Rose said quietly but intently, looking into my eyes. My breath caught. Rose, I asked. She nodded, and another tear joined the first, slowly trickling down her cheek. Those were the last words Toby said to me before we both passed out in the car accident. They were the last words he ever said to me in this life. My tears joined hers. How did you know? I whispered quietly, almost a whisper. Toby, in the pub, when you told me. I knew. He met me there too, told me how brave I was, but that I needed to let you go and love you like I always have. He told me that you wouldn't be able to ask the question when the time came, but that I had to tell you. Our last words. With those words, we fell into each other's arms. I wrapped my arms around Rose in the fading light of noon, and we cried. As we cried, we spoke quietly of the man we knew, friend, lover, husband, and father. We mourned our common loss together. Evening came, the noise of the hospital continued. Rose made room for me in the small hospital bed, and we continued to hold each other as best we could, both of us suddenly tired. Finally, as we fell asleep, I kissed the top of her head and whispered, I love you, Petal. Rose snorted slightly in response and replied, I love you too, Cam. After that day, we got progressively better. The kids, Sarah, Carrie, and Robbie, found us the next day, huddled together on the bed under a hospital blanket that the nurse must have thrown over us during the night. Sarah clapped her hands when we woke up, and they all stood looking at us in our sleep. I kissed Rose gently on the lips, getting up and stretching. Carrie smiled, and I kissed Robbie. In the morning, we explained most of yesterday to Louise, omitting the part about sleeping with Toby. Later that week, we all agreed that Rose wouldn't be moving home after she was discharged, but would move in with Sarah and me. Our new apartment was closer to the hospital, so we decided that Carrie and Robbie would stay in Rose's apartment, and they would rent out the other 2 rooms to other university students, with May and Rose's consent, of course. By the time Rose was discharged, she was no longer wearing formal casts, but was using rigid cloth ones that could be removed as needed so she could continue to heal. We all got a good look at the stump of her left forearm, with healthy skin growing around it. Although Rose was sad, she had mostly accepted her disability. In addition, the skull fracture Rose had suffered was healed. Thankfully, there were no effects other than a mild concussion, which was dealt with at the hospital. Her homecoming was one of her happiest days in years, but after seeing our relationship blossom and hearing our story, the doctors told Rose that she could resume a fulfilling relationship once she got home, albeit with caution for the first few months. The kids had already moved a lot of Rose's clothes and personal belongings into the new house and had even presumptuously placed them in the master bedroom with mine, rather than in the spare room as we had agreed. But to be honest, I didn't mind such insolence. When we got home, we spent a few hours with the kids, talking. But after dinner, Carrie and Robbie went to Rose's old place, and Sarah excused herself to go to her friend's house for a few hours, leaving Rose and me alone for the first time all day. A few weeks later, Louise and my divorce became final. Our assets were officially divided thanks to the prenuptial agreement. Louise got very little. She didn't touch my business, which was worth quite a lot. The sale of our original house was left to me, and although I wasn't supposed to do it, I gave her a check for $440,000, which was a little less than half of our total savings. Why did I do this, you ask? Well, it was for two reasons. Firstly, Louise had killed any relationship with us by her actions. I wanted to give her enough money so that she could leave her parents' home and start a life elsewhere. I heard that she had been offered a job in Wollongong, which meant that we wouldn't have to see her anymore. By giving her this money, I hoped it would encourage her to move. Besides, it added zero to the amount I gave her, so I wasn't short of money. Speaking of Roger, it looked like he was in trouble. When he couldn't find a job, he started selling drugs to a dealer, and in the first week, he sold them to an undercover cop. So now he's serving 2 years for dealing drugs. To me, it couldn't have happened to a nicer guy. 6 months later, Rose and I got married. She was beautiful in her wedding dress, with a bouquet on her belly. She was self-conscious about the way. She looked and went through a few bouts of depression, but with the kids and me always by her side, it never lasted long. Rose also changed jobs, but after getting a degree in psychology, she began counseling those who had lost limbs like herself. 2 years after we were married, the government honored her on Australia Day for her contribution to helping those with disabilities in need. In her speech, she thanked her family and friends and then called me on stage, citing me as the main reason for her success because I supported her as she got back on her feet after her accident. It was a stressful time. Rose and I did several media interviews. We even appeared on a couple of morning shows, talking about the physical and mental challenges of people with physical disabilities. My wife was wonderful despite her handicap, never letting anyone see her worry or cry. Yet, in those moments when she was down, she knew I was there to help her get up again. Rose and my love grew every day, and although we had our disagreements, we always forgave each other and never went to bed angry. After the award, we didn't see Louise for about 3 years. It was Carrie and Robbie's wedding. They had graduated with honors in their chosen fields, had good jobs, but wanted to start a family while they were young. Carrie didn't want to invite her mother. In 3 years, they'd spoken twice, and both times they'd been a little wordy and unfriendly. But I persuaded her to invite Louise for the simple reason that she had given birth to Carrie and should be able to celebrate the fact. In the end, Carrie agreed but asked that Louise be seated at one of the tables with the regular guests, not the relatives. I shrugged. I didn't care where my ex-wife sat, as long as it wasn't next to me and Rose. I just wanted Carrie not to look back in later years, wishing her mother had at least attended her wedding. In the end, a compromise was reached. Louise ended up with her elderly parents, who happily sat a couple of tables away to keep the peace with their granddaughter and her new husband. As is always the case with ex-wives at weddings, I ended up at the bar and got myself a gin and Coke. It wasn't on the bill, but since I was paying, I could take what I wanted. When Louise came up to me, leaning on the bar next to me, she ordered a glass of white wine, then turned and looked at me. "I've never asked for forgiveness, have I?" she asked bluntly, but it was more of a statement than a question. "No," I replied, turning around and looking at the crowd. Rose, Sarah, and Carrie were standing at the other end of the room, laughing about something. I smiled. "But then again, I never thought you would be," I told her, finishing the sentence. Louise sighed. "Right. I wasn't myself then, a complete and utter mess," she said. "Uh-huh," I said, emphasizing the last syllable and taking a sip of my drink. Rose looked at me, smiled, and then frowned when she saw Louise next to me. I shook my head slightly, and she nodded, realizing that it was no big deal. "I saw you both at the Australia Day Awards and have been following what you've accomplished since then," Louise said sadly. She watched my wife, her former friend, laughing with our daughters and knew she could never enjoy that kind of relationship with either of her girls again. "They hate me, don't they?" said Louise, looking at them, then at me, then into her wine glass. "Hate is a strong word," Louise said, upon reflection. I grinned. "No, it's actually the right word for what they think of you, but as time goes on, the fire subsides. In a dozen years, who knows? Maybe the girls will call you, you. I felt rather than saw Louise's shoulders slump. Then she turned to me. What about you, Cameron? Do you hate me? My ex-wife asked. I shrugged my shoulders. Hate, loathe, despise, take your pick. I heard the band start tuning their instruments in the background. I smiled to myself. Soon I would be able to dance with my daughter. But you convinced Carrie to ask me out tonight, so if you hate me so much, why? She moaned. I turned to look at Louise, and for the first time all evening, I looked at her. Compared to the one I knew before, she was kind of hollow. She had a hunted look in her eyes, and her hair didn't just look like it had grayed or been covered in failed dye, it looked like it had receded a bit from her hairline. In the end, it dawned on me that the woman I once cherished was shattered. I observed her silently for another moment before speaking. Louise, no mother should miss her daughter's wedding, regardless of past mistakes. Yet, I didn't bring you here to offer solace. My intention was to ensure our daughter's marriage commenced with a clear conscience. Pausing briefly, I gestured with my glass towards a passing couple. That's all. And if our paths never cross again, I'll count myself fortunate. With those words, I departed, joining my family for the wedding festivities. Amidst the joyous atmosphere, I heard stifled sobs. I'm sorry, but her remorse failed to elicit sympathy for the remainder of the evening. We celebrated, danced, and laughed, and I never encountered Louise again. Years later, we received news of Louise's passing from her parents. It coincided with Sarah's engagement to the doctor, a development that caught us off guard. At Sarah's engagement celebration, we learned of Louise's untimely demise due to complications from an ovarian cyst, her departure marked by sorrow and solitude in a hospital room with only her parents by her side. She had chosen not to inform us. Her pain was profound. Meanwhile, Rose and I kept our relationship discreet. As we welcomed grandchildren into our lives, we reveled in adventures across the globe, showering our descendants with love and affection, possibly even our great-grandchildren. They knew of our enduring love, unchanged through the years. When I gazed at Rose, I saw the same girl I fell for at 18, the woman I married at 40, now a spirited grandmother nearing 82. And in that moment, I knew I was blessed. I knew, deep in my heart, that I would be cherished until my final breath. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel and stay tuned for the next video.